Hey guys, tonight we're going to swap our cozy beds for a rough, smoke-filled longhouse and our modern comforts for a life of relentless toil. We often picture Vikings as fierce warriors, sailing in longships, plundering distant lands, and drinking mead in grand halls. But for the vast majority of these Norse people, life was far less glamorous and much more miserable. Tonight, we're going to dive into the miserable life of a Viking farmer. And I mean truly miserable. We're talking about a level of daily struggle against nature, hunger, and sheer physical exhaustion that, frankly, you probably wouldn't survive a single season of. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening, drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself transported to a small farmstead in Viking Age Scandinavia, perhaps in what is now Norway or Sweden, around 900 CE. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, persistent odor of livestock. You are no longer a modern observer, you are a Viking farmer, a bond, the backbone of Norse society, a free man or woman whose entire existence revolves around wresting sustenance from an unforgiving land. This isn't a life of epic sagas and glorious raids. This is a relentless, grinding struggle for survival. Your farm is not a sprawling, fertile expanse. No, you gaze out upon harsh lands. Harsher lives? Much of Scandinavia is dominated by rugged mountains, dense forests, and countless fjords. The arable land, suitable for cultivation, is scarce and often of poor quality. Imagine trying to grow crops in thin, rocky soil, constantly battling against exposed bedrock and steep slopes. This isn't the rich, deep earth of the Roman plains or the fertile Nile Delta. This is marginal land, grudgingly yielding its bounty. The climate itself is your first and most formidable enemy. You experience long, dark, and brutally cold winters. For months on end, the land is locked in ice and snow, making any outdoor work impossible. Imagine the biting winds that howl across the landscape, cutting straight through your woolen clothing. The days are short, sometimes just a few hours of weak daylight, plunging you into prolonged periods of twilight or complete darkness. This isn't merely inconvenient, it fundamentally dictates your entire agricultural cycle, leaving a very narrow window for growth. When spring finally arrives, it's a desperate race against time. The thawing earth reveals muddy, waterlogged fields. You have to work quickly, preparing the ground for planting before the brief summer vanishes. The summers, while offering precious sunlight, are often short, cool, and unpredictable. A sudden cold snap, an unseasonable frost, or prolonged rains can devastate a meager crop, pushing your family to the brink of starvation. You constantly scan the skies, a knot of anxiety in your stomach, praying for enough warmth and sun to ripen your barley or oats. The soil quality is abysmal. Years of cultivation in the same limited plots, coupled with rudimentary understanding of fertilization, often relying on animal manure, if available, meant that the soil nutrients were constantly depleted. Yields were incredibly low compared to more fertile regions of Europe. You put in backbreaking labor, but the earth often gave back only a fraction of what you invested. It's a constant battle against geological and climatic odds. Beyond the fields, your farmstead would include small pastures, often on marginal land or in forest clearings, where you'd graze your limited livestock. Your animals, a few cattle, sheep, goats, or pigs, were smaller and hardier than modern breeds, adapted to the tough conditions. They were crucial for survival, providing meat, milk, wool, and labor. But keeping them alive through the harsh winters was a constant challenge, requiring precious fodder and shelter. The sense of isolation is profound. Your farmstead might be miles from your nearest neighbor, separated by dense forests or treacherous waterways. There are no roads as we know them, just rough tracks or ancient paths. News travels slowly, and assistance in times of crisis is often far away or non-existent. This self-reliance is a point of pride, but it also amplifies the burden of your solitary struggle against the elements. Every day is a testament to perseverance. From dawn till dusk, you are engaged in a relentless battle against the environment. Your life is dictated by the seasons, by the whims of the weather, and by the stubborn resistance of the land itself. There's no escaping the cold, the hunger, or the sheer physical demands. This is the unvarnished reality of a Viking farmer's existence, a life defined by the grim reality of harsh lands. Harsher lives? It makes your average winter blues seem like a vacation, doesn't it? You've felt the biting cold and cursed the rocky soil. But in the life of a Viking farmer, the most terrifying shadow looming over every season was the gnawing hunger, seasonal starvation. Your entire existence was a desperate year-round battle against famine, where meager harvests and long, dark winters constantly pushed your family to the very brink of survival. Imagine late autumn. The brief summer has faded, and the last meager harvest of barley or oats has been gathered. You and your family meticulously thresh and process every precious grain, knowing that this small pile of food must sustain you for months. There's no grocery store down the road, no global supply chain to fall back on. Your survival depends entirely on what your small plot of land and your limited livestock can provide. The anxiety in the air is almost palpable, a constant hum of worry about whether there will be enough. The problem wasn't just the overall quantity, it was the unpredictability. A sudden early frost could decimate a crop before it fully ripened. A prolonged, unusually wet summer could lead to widespread blight. A swarm of locusts, or a particularly hungry band of raiders, could wipe out your stores in an instant. Every year was a gamble, and the stakes were nothing less than your family's very lives. You'd spend sleepless nights listening to the wind, praying it wouldn't bring the ruin of a late-season storm. As winter truly sets in, the hunger becomes a constant companion. Your rations are strictly controlled. You eat less and less each day, trying to stretch every grain, every piece of dried meat. The food is monotonous, often thin porridge made from the last of the grain. Perhaps some dried fish or a bit of cheese if your animals are still producing. Imagine the dull, persistent ache in your stomach, the constant feeling of emptiness, even after a meal. Your body, already weakened by hard labor, slowly begins to waste away. The livestock, precious as they are, also represent a precarious resource. While they provide milk and meat, they also require fodder, which itself had to be harvested and stored during the summer. If fodder supplies ran low, you face the agonizing decision to slaughter an animal early, sacrificing future milk or breeding potential, or risk it starving through the winter. This was a brutal calculation, a desperate balancing act between immediate survival and long-term viability. You'd probably see many animals weakened by winter simply collapse and die. Another blow to your dwindling resources. For protein, hunting and fishing were essential, but these were unpredictable and dangerous endeavors. The forests were vast and often dangerous, filled with wolves or bears. The seas and lakes could be treacherous. A bad hunting season or a frozen lake could mean a catastrophic loss of potential food. You'd spend hours, even days, out in the bitter cold, setting snares or casting lines, often returning empty-handed, the weight of disappointment heavy on your shoulders. The children, especially, suffered during these lean times. Malnutrition was rampant, leading to stunted growth, weakened immune systems, and increased susceptibility to disease. Many children simply didn't survive the brutal winters, succumbing to illness when their bodies were too weak to fight. This grim reality meant that every healthy child was a blessing, and every loss a quiet, agonizing tragedy. While detailed demographic records are scarce for this period, archaeological studies of Viking Age burials consistently show evidence of widespread malnutrition and high child mortality rates. Particularly in winter months, the gnawing hunger permeated every aspect of life. It affected your energy levels, making the already grueling farm work even harder. It affected your mood, fostering irritability and despair, It affected your thoughts, as your mind constantly revolved around the next meal, the next harvest. There was no escaping its persistent shadow. The brief summer, when it finally arrived, brought a desperate rush to produce. You'd work from dawn till dusk, planting, cultivating, and praying, knowing that every hour of daylight was critical. But even a good harvest rarely meant abundance. It simply meant surviving until the next lean season. The idea of a surplus, of having enough to truly relax, was often a distant dream, reserved for the very wealthiest Jarl's chieftains. So, as you imagine the proud Viking warrior, remember the vast majority of his people, the farmers, who lived with the constant, grinding reality of hunger. Their lives were a relentless testament to humanity's struggle against the elements, where survival was a constant triumph and starvation a perennial threat. It makes you feel incredibly grateful for your well-stocked pantry, doesn't it? You face the constant gnawing of hunger and the ever-present threat of seasonal starvation. But producing even those meager harvests meant a life defined by sheer physical exertion. For the Viking farmer, it was an existence of toil and tools, primitive drudgery, where every task was a monumental effort performed with rudimentary implements that demanded immense strength and relentless perseverance. Imagine dawn breaking over your farmstead. There are no tractors rumbling to life, no automated irrigation systems. Your day begins with a deep, weary sigh as you prepare to tackle the land with tools that would be considered museum pieces today. Your primary implement for turning the soil is the ard, or scratch plow. This isn't a modern plow that turns over furrows, it's a simple, wooden implement, often with an iron share, pulled by oxen or, if you're too poor, by sheer human muscle. Imagine guiding this clumsy tool, trying to break up the tough, rocky soil, your shoulders aching with every step. Feeling the resistance of the earth, it only scratched the surface, requiring repeated passes to prepare the ground for planting. Sowing the seeds was done by hand, casting precious handfuls of barley or oats across the uneven, freshly scratched ground. Then came the constant battle against weeds. Without herbicides, you'd spend countless hours bent double, painstakingly pulling weeds by hand, or with a simple hoe, under the relentless sun or chilling wind. Your back would scream in protest. Your fingers would be perpetually stained with earth, and the work would feel endless as new weeds seemed to sprout faster than you could remove them. Harvesting was a frantic, desperate race against the looming winter. Your main tool would be a sickle for grain or a scythe for hay. Imagine swinging a scythe for hours on end, cutting down tough stalks of grain, the rhythmic swish becoming a dull drone in your ears. Every swing was a test of strength and endurance, requiring precision to avoid cutting yourself and to gather as much grain as possible. Your hands would be raw, your arms heavy, as you meticulously gathered every last kernel, knowing that your family's survival depended on it. Then came the threshing. After harvesting, the grain had to be separated from the chaff. This involved beating the bundles of grain with a flail, two pieces of wood joined by a leather thong. Imagine the monotonous, back-breaking work of repeatedly swinging the flail, hour after hour, dust filling the air, your muscles burning, as you separated the edible grain from the useless stalks. It was dirty, dusty work, often done in cramped, smoky barns, the rhythmic thud of the flail, a constant soundtrack to your life. Beyond the fields, animal husbandry presented its own unique drudgery. You'd spend hours mucking out stalls, hauling water, and collecting fodder to feed your livestock, particularly during the long winters. Your animals, though hardy, still required constant care, and any illness or loss could spell disaster for your family. You'd use simple pitchforks and shovels, often made from wood with iron tips, their weight and clumsiness adding to your exhaustion. Building and maintaining your longhouse and other farm structures was another continuous chore. You'd be felling trees with a hand axe, splitting logs with wedges, and shaping timber with adzes. This was physically demanding work, requiring strength, skill, and an ever-present awareness of danger. One slip of the axe, one misjudged swing, could mean a deep gash or a broken bone. A catastrophic event when far from any form of medical aid. Even simple domestic tasks were incredibly laborious. Hauling water from a well or stream, chopping firewood, grinding flour with a quernstone, a smaller, hand-operated version of what made the pharaoh's teeth terrible, but no less demanding. All these were daily efforts that consumed immense amounts of time and energy. Your life was an endless series of physical tasks, each one demanding strength and perseverance. There was no pushing a button, no turning a faucet. Every necessity of life was earned through raw, unceasing effort. Archaeological discoveries of Viking Age farm tools often show signs of extensive wear and repair, highlighting their constant use and the value placed on even rudimentary implements. The lack of specialized tools meant that every individual had to be a jack of all trades. You were not just a farmer, you were a carpenter, a blacksmith at a basic level, a herdsman, and a laborer, all rolled into one. Your hands would be permanently calloused, scarred, and often swollen. Your body, though strong, would bear the marks of a lifetime of relentless toil. This primitive drudgery left little time or energy for anything else. After a day of endless labor, often from dawn until well after dusk, you'd collapse onto your sleeping furs, exhausted, only to wake and repeat the cycle. The concept of leisure, of a day of rest, was almost alien. Survival demanded every ounce of your strength, every waking moment. It makes your modern gym routine look like a walk in the park, doesn't it? You've experienced the sheer physical grind of Viking farming, where every task was a brutal testament to primitive tools and relentless effort. Now, let's move from the fields into the heart of the Viking home itself, and discover the stark reality of farmstead life cramped and unsanitary. Your longhouse, far from a cozy refuge, was a multi-purpose structure where humans and animals coexisted, filled with smoke, smells, and a pervasive lack of cleanliness that would shock modern sensibilities. Imagine stepping inside your family's longhouse. It's a large, rectangular structure, typically built from timber, turf, or stone, with a high arched roof often supported by internal posts. The first thing that hits you is the darkness. Windows were small, if they existed at all, often just narrow slits or unglazed openings to keep out the brutal cold. Most of the light came from the central hearth. As your eyes adjust, you notice the perpetual gloom, even in the middle of the day. Then comes the smoke. In the center of the longhouse, running down much of its length, is the hearth, a long, open fire pit where all cooking was done, and which provided the only source of heat. There was no chimney in the modern sense. Instead, smoke was meant to escape through a smoke hole in the roof, or simply seep out through gaps in the roof and walls. The reality, however, was that much of the smoke lingered, filling the air with a choking, acrid haze. Your eyes would constantly sting and water, your throat would always feel scratchy, and your lungs would be perpetually irritated. Imagine spending almost every waking hour in a smoky room. Chronic respiratory problems were a near certainty. The layout itself speaks volumes about cramped communal living. The longhouse was not divided into separate rooms for different family members or activities. It was a single, large space. Along the walls, raised platforms or benches, covered with furs and textiles, served as sleeping areas and daytime seating. Your entire family, parents, children, and perhaps elderly relatives would sleep side by side, sharing what little warmth and comfort was available. There was absolutely no privacy. Every sneeze, every cough, every murmur in the night was shared by all. And then there were the animals. In many longhouses, especially in the colder regions or during the harsh winter months, your valuable livestock, cattle, sheep, goats, shared the same roof as you, often separated only by a low partition or simply kept in a section of the house. Their body heat helped warm the dwelling, but they also contributed significantly to the pervasive smells and unsanitary conditions. Imagine the constant aroma of manure, urine, and wet animal fur mingling with the smoke and human odors. This wasn't a choice for comfort. It was a desperate strategy for survival. Protecting precious livestock from the elements and predators, the filth was pervasive. There was no running water, no indoor plumbing, no concept of sterile cleaning. Waste, both human and animal, was often simply dealt with by tossing it outside the house or collecting it in rudimentary pits. Flies and other insects would be a constant nuisance in warmer months, drawn to the accumulated waste. Floors were typically beaten earth, which would absorb spills and odors. Vermin, rats, and mice, would be common, constantly scurrying through the rafters and across the floors, attracted by stored food. These conditions were prime breeding grounds for disease. Archaeological excavations of Viking Age longhouses often uncover layers of compacted refuse, animal waste, and food debris within the living areas, confirming these unsanitary conditions. Personal hygiene was minimal. Bathing was infrequent, usually done in communal bathhouses or in natural bodies of water when weather permitted. Clothing, made from wool or linen, was rarely washed thoroughly and would harbor dirt, sweat, and lice. Imagine the constant itch of lice crawling through your hair and clothing, an unavoidable part of daily life. The lack of clean water for washing, and the sheer effort involved, meant that cleanliness as we know it was an impossible luxury. Food preparation, done over the open hearth, would be a messy affair. Spills were common, and the smoke and grease would coat every surface. Food was often preserved through drying, salting, or smoking, contributing to the distinct smells of the longhouse. Without proper refrigeration, food spoilage was a constant concern, leading to instances of food poisoning. The sense of being perpetually dirty was simply a part of life. You lived with the grime, the smells, and the constant presence of waste. This wasn't a choice. It was the reality of survival in a world without modern sanitation or infrastructure. While there might have been attempts at sweeping or tidying, the fundamental nature of the dwelling and daily activities ensured a baseline level of pervasive, unsanitary conditions. So, as you picture the cozy Viking family in their longhouse, remember the grim realities beneath the surface. It was a communal, cramped, smoky, and often unsanitary existence, where humans and animals shared the same air and floor. This was farmstead life for the Viking, a relentless battle not just against the elements outside, but also against the grime and disease within, making true comfort and cleanliness an almost impossible dream. It truly makes you appreciate your own bathroom and air purifier, doesn't it? You've explored the cramped and unsanitary reality of the Viking longhouse. But these conditions were far more than just uncomfortable. They were a breeding ground for invisible killers. For the Viking farmer and his family, disease and death, the unseen scythe was a constant companion. With rampant illnesses, poor hygiene, and a complete lack of modern medical care ensuring that life was often brutal and brutally short. Imagine a typical day on your farm. Your hands are perpetually covered in dirt and animal waste. You eat your meals with unwashed hands, sharing communal bowls and utensils. Your drinking water comes from a nearby stream or well, unfiltered and often contaminated by runoff from fields or animal pens. There's no understanding of germ theory. The concept that tiny, unseen organisms could cause illness is entirely alien. These everyday realities created a perfect environment for sickness to spread like wildfire through your family and community. Infectious diseases were rampant. Dysentery, caused by contaminated food and water, would sweep through settlements, leading to severe dehydration and often death, especially among the young and old. You'd witness family members suffering from relentless diarrhea and vomiting, their bodies wasting away, with no effective remedies available. A single outbreak could decimate a household, leaving few hands to tend the fields or care for the remaining sick. Respiratory infections like pneumonias, bronchitis, and tuberculosis were also tragically common. The smoky atmosphere of the longhouse, combined with the damp, cold climate and constant exposure to the elements during outdoor work, severely weakened lungs. Imagine the chronic coughs that echoed through the house, the feverish nights, the slow, agonizing decline of a loved one whose lungs were simply giving out. The very place that offered shelter also contributed to these silent killers. Even seemingly minor ailments could become life-threatening. A simple cut from a scythe or an axe, a graze from a rock, or a blister from constant toil could easily become infected. Without antiseptics or antibiotics, a localized infection could rapidly spread, leading to sepsis, blood poisoning, gangrene, or a limb so swollen and painful it rendered you useless. You'd witness men with festering wounds, their faces pale with fever, knowing that the infection was slowly consuming them. A small injury could quickly sign your death warrant. Parasitic infections were ubiquitous. Living in close proximity to livestock, walking barefoot, and consuming contaminated food and water meant that intestinal worms and other parasites were an almost universal affliction. While rarely immediately fatal, these parasites would constantly drain your body of nutrients, contributing to chronic fatigue, weakness, and making you more susceptible to other deadlier diseases. It was a silent, internal battle that everyone fought, unknowingly. Childbirth, as in many ancient societies, was incredibly dangerous for both mother and infant. Infections during or after delivery were common, and many women succumbed to puerperal fever. Infant and child mortality rates were staggeringly high. You'd likely experience the profound grief of losing multiple children before they reached adulthood, a common tragedy in Viking Age families. Archaeological evidence from Viking Age burial sites consistently shows a high percentage of infant and child remains, starkly indicating the brutal reality of early childhood mortality rates. Medical care, when available, was rudimentary. There were no trained doctors as we know them, only local healers who relied on herbal remedies, folk wisdom, and sometimes desperate measures like bleeding or cauterization. Their knowledge was limited, their tools basic, and their understanding of disease causation often linked to supernatural forces rather than biological ones. While they might offer some comfort or temporary relief, they were largely powerless against serious infections or widespread epidemics. The widespread lack of personal hygiene further compounded the problem. Infrequent bathing, unwashed clothing, and the constant presence of lice and fleas meant that disease vectors were always present. Vermin like rats and mice, drawn to food stores, also contributed to the spread of illness. The longhouse, meanwhile providing shelter, was a hotbed of contagion, a constant threat to the health of everyone within its smoky walls. The result of all these factors was a dramatically shortened lifespan. The average life expectancy in the Viking Age was tragically low, with many not surviving past their 30s or 40s. While some might live to old age, it was often a testament to immense luck and an incredibly robust constitution. Your life, from beginning to end, was a constant struggle for survival against the unseen scythe of disease and the brutal realities of a world without modern medicine. It makes you incredibly grateful for a simple doctor's visit and a pharmacy, doesn't it? You felt the pervasive chill of disease and the constant threat of an early demise. But a Viking farmer's miseries weren't solely confined to the brutal land or the unhealthy longhouse. Beyond the fields, you faced additional burdens, raids, and taxes, forced contributions, and societal obligations that added layers of stress and danger to an already precarious existence. Imagine you are tilling your small plot, your back aching, your mind focused on the meager harvest that must sustain your family. Suddenly, a distant horn sounds, or a neighbor rushes by, his face pale with terror. Raiders. These might be rival clans, disgruntled neighbors, or even Vikings from distant lands, just as often raiding their own people as foreign shores. Your farmstead, with its precious livestock and stored food, is a tempting target. Your life of ceaseless labor could be wiped out in an instant. You would scramble to gather your family, perhaps to hide what few valuables you possessed, or to try and drive your animals to safety. There was no professional army to protect every isolated farm. You, as a free farmer, were expected to defend your own. You might grab a simple axe or spear, standing alongside your neighbors. A desperate, poorly organized defense against hardened warriors. The clash would be brief and brutal. If you were lucky, the raiders might just take your cattle and leave. If you were unlucky, your longhouse could be burned, your family killed or enslaved, and your entire livelihood utterly destroyed. The memory of a raid, even if survived, would leave a lasting scar of fear and vulnerability. Even without external raids, you were subject to the demands of your local chieftain or jarl. These powerful leaders, who commanded loyalty and respect, often levied their own forms of taxes or tributes. This wasn't a formal written tax code as we know it, but rather an expectation of loyalty and contribution. You might be required to contribute a portion of your harvest, a certain number of animals, or a quantity of valuable furs or ironwork to the Jarl's Hall. Refusal could mean severe consequences, including confiscation of your land or even outlawry. Imagine working tirelessly all year, only to see a significant portion of your hard-won produce hauled away by the Jarl's men, leaving your family even leaner for the winter. Beyond these direct contributions, there were obligations of service. As a free Viking farmer, you were part of the lading, a naval levy. This meant that if the Jarl or king called for it, you might be required to contribute to manning a longship for a military campaign, perhaps a raid on foreign lands or a defense against invaders. This was a terrifying prospect. You were a farmer, not a seasoned warrior, yet you were expected to leave your fields, abandon your family, and risk your life in battle. This military service could last for weeks or months, leaving your farm neglected and your family vulnerable. Many farmers who embarked on such expeditions never returned, perishing in battle or succumbing to disease on distant shores. Historians still actively debate the precise frequency and duration of ladung service for the average Viking farmer. Though its burden was undoubtedly significant when called upon, societal obligations extended to hosting. Hospitality was a deeply ingrained Viking virtue, but it could also be a burden. You might be expected to provide lodging and food for travelers, messengers, or even the Jarl and his retinue if they passed through your area. While honorable, this could deplete your precious food stores, especially during lean times, adding another strain to your already stretched resources. Then there were the legal obligations and fines. Viking society operated under a complex system of customary law, administered through local assemblies things. Disputes over land, property, or honor were common. If you were involved in a legal dispute, you might be required to attend the thing, often traveling for days. If found guilty of an offense, the punishment was typically a fine bought, payable in goods, silver, or land. These fines could be ruinous for a struggling farmer, potentially stripping you of essential resources or even forcing you into debt bondage. It was a constant reminder that even as a free man, your life was regulated by a stern, often unforgiving legal system. Even seemingly simple events, like funerals or weddings, could carry significant financial and social obligations. Feasts, gift-giving, and elaborate rituals were expected, requiring farmers to stretch their meager resources even further. These were moments of community, but also moments of economic pressure, where reputation and social standing could be gained or lost through your ability to meet expectations. So, as you picture the independent Viking farmer, remember the unseen burdens that weighed heavily on his shoulders. Beyond the relentless toil of the land, he faced the constant threat of raids, the demands of the Jarl, the obligation of military service, and the crushing weight of societal and legal expectations. His life was a continuous struggle, not just against nature, but against a demanding society that left little room for comfort or security, truly cementing the miserable life of a Viking farmer. It makes you feel pretty secure just paying your regular taxes, doesn't it? You've navigated the external burdens of raids and taxes. Now, let's explore the intricate daily life within the Viking farmstead through the lens of gender roles, shared burdens, separate spheres. While Viking society was patriarchal, The harsh realities of survival meant that both men and women endured immense toil, their lives defined by distinct yet equally arduous tasks that were crucial for the family's very existence. Imagine a typical morning in your longhouse. As the first light filters through the smoke hole, the household stirs. You, as the male farmer, would immediately turn your attention to the outdoor world. Your domain was primarily the fields and the livestock. This meant rising early to tend to the cattle and sheep, leading them to pasture, milking the cows, and cleaning out the stalls. You'd spend countless hours in the fields, plowing the stubborn earth with your ard, sowing precious seeds, and later, painstakingly harvesting the meager crops of barley and oats. Your hands, calloused and scarred, would be perpetually busy with heavy manual labor. You'd be felling trees for timber, splitting logs for firewood, and repairing fences or farm buildings. During the short, intense summer, you'd work from dawn until dusk, trying to maximize every hour of daylight to ensure a sufficient harvest and enough hay for winter fodder. The strength of your back and arms was your most valuable asset, constantly tested by the demands of the land. But your responsibilities extended beyond the farm. As a free Viking man, you were expected to be ready for military service. This could mean participating in local things assemblies where disputes were settled, or, more dramatically, being called upon by your jarl or king to join a Lidung naval levy for a raiding expedition or defense. This meant leaving your farm and family, often for weeks or months, to face the brutal realities of combat or the perils of the sea. The image of the fierce Viking warrior was only possible because of the underlying agrarian system that sustained him, a system he also had to defend. Meanwhile, your wife's day, though confined largely to the homestead, was equally relentless and vital. Her sphere was primarily the longhouse and its immediate surroundings, ensuring the daily survival and well-being of the family. She would be the first to rise, rekindling the fire in the central hearth, filling the longhouse with the comforting scent of wood smoke and warming embers. Her tasks were incredibly diverse and physically demanding. She was the chief manager of the household, responsible for all domestic activities. This included preparing meals over the open fire, a smoky and often dangerous task. She'd be grinding grain into flour with a quernstone, kneading dough and cooking the daily porridge, stew, or roasted meat. Imagine the constant heat and smoke in her eyes, the strain on her arms from grinding grain for hours. Beyond cooking, she was responsible for textile production, a vital activity in a cold climate. This involved cleaning and preparing wool from your sheep, spinning it into thread using a drop spindle, and then weaving it into fabric on a loom. She would then sew and repair clothing for the entire family, ensuring everyone had warm, durable garments for the harsh winters. This was a continuous, labor-intensive process that demanded skill, patience, and endless hours of repetitive work. Archaeological evidence from Viking Age graves often includes spindle whorls and loom weights, highlighting the pervasive nature of female involvement in textile production. She also played a crucial role in food preservation. With no refrigeration, she would be drying fish, salting meat, smoking foodstuffs, and preparing fermented dairy products like cheese or skyr. These processes were essential for ensuring your family had enough food to survive the long, lean winter months. Her knowledge of these techniques, passed down through generations, was critical to preventing starvation. The care of young children and the elderly also fell squarely on her shoulders. She would nurse infants, teach younger children basic skills, and care for infirm parents or relatives. This was a constant, emotionally demanding task, especially given the high rates of illness and mortality. Her resilience and nurturing provided the emotional and physical bedrock for the family. While men handled the larger, outdoor animals, women often took primary responsibility for smaller livestock like chickens, ducks, and sometimes even pigs kept closer to the house. They would collect eggs, tend to sick animals, and ensure their well-being. Despite the clear division of labor, there was significant overlap and mutual dependence. During harvest time, everyone, men, women, and older children, would work together in the fields. During a raid, everyone would participate in the defense. The longhouse itself was a shared space where these distinct roles converged. The strength of the Viking family unit lay in this rigorous, yet complementary division of labor, where each gender's arduous tasks were indispensable for the survival and prosperity of the entire household. It's a testament to the fact that while their spheres were separate, their burdens were undeniably shared, making the life of a Viking farmer, male or female, thus a relentless and miserable grind. You've explored the demanding gender roles and the relentless daily grind of the Viking farmstead. But for a significant portion of the year, all outdoor toil ceased, and your family faced perhaps the most relentless test of all, the chill of winter: survival's test. The long, dark, and often deadly months spent battling extreme cold, profound boredom, and dwindling supplies truly pushed the Viking farmer to the edge. Imagine late autumn. The last of the harvest is in. The animals are brought into the sheltered byres, often within the longhouse itself, and the days grow shorter, darker. The sun, when it appears at all, hangs low in the southern sky, offering little warmth. Soon, the first snows fall, gradually blanketing the landscape in a thick, insulating layer of white. What beauty this brings is quickly overshadowed by the profound reality of your situation for months. You will be essentially confined to your longhouse. The cold is omnipresent. Despite the central hearth, the longhouse is drafty, and heat quickly escapes through the smoke hole and gaps in the walls. You bundle yourselves in layers of wool and furs, but the chill still permeates. Your breath mists in the air, even indoors. Imagine huddling close to the fire, your face flushed with heat while your back remains cold. Your fingers and toes would ache from the persistent cold, and the risk of frostbite was ever present if you ventured outside for too long without proper protection. The darkness is profound. For much of the winter, especially in the northern reaches of Scandinavia, daylight is scarce. You wake in darkness, work in twilight, and retire in darkness. The only light comes from the flickering flames of the hearth or the occasional sputtering oil lamp, casting long, dancing shadows across the smoky interior. This prolonged darkness would undoubtedly affect your mood, leading to a kind of seasonal melancholy, a constant feeling of gloom that settled deep in your bones. Food supplies dwindle with agonizing slowness. Your family constantly watches the dwindling stores of dried meat, salted fish, preserved vegetables, and precious grains. Rations become even tighter than in autumn, stretching every morsel to ensure survival until spring. The hunger, previously a gnawing ache, now becomes a deep, chronic emptiness. You count every piece of hard bread, every strip of dried jerky, knowing that a miscalculation could mean starvation. You'd share stories of past winters when families just a few valleys over didn't make it. A stark warning. Boredom becomes an unexpected adversary. With outdoor work severely curtailed, and no books, games, or entertainment as we know it, the long hours inside the longhouse could become incredibly tedious. You'd engage in storytelling, perhaps carving small wooden figures, mending tools, or preparing hides. But the sheer monotony of being confined with the same few people, doing the same few tasks for months on end, would test even the strongest bonds. Arguments, fueled by hunger and cabin fever, could easily erupt. While direct accounts of boredom are rare, the prevalence of board games like Hnefatafel and elaborate carving work found in archaeological sites suggests a strong need for indoor activities and distractions during the long winters. Then there's the constant worry about your livestock. These animals, sheltering in the longhouse or in nearby byres, were your lifeline. You'd meticulously ration their fodder, checking them daily for signs of illness or weakness. The loss of a single cow or sheep could mean the difference between survival and starvation for your family. The smell of their breath, the warmth of their bodies, was a constant comfort and a persistent reminder of your utter dependence on them. Hygiene, already poor, would worsen dramatically. Bathing was almost impossible in freezing temperatures. Waste would accumulate. The air in the longhouse, thick with smoke and the odors of humans and animals, would become even more stagnant. Disease, as we've discussed, would thrive in these conditions, and a winter illness could quickly become fatal when your body was weakened by cold and malnutrition. The psychological toll was immense. The feeling of being trapped, the constant cold, the gnawing hunger, the pervasive darkness, and the fear of not making it to spring, all combined to create a profound sense of despair. You'd constantly scan the skies, praying for the first signs of thaw, for the lengthening of the days, for any indication that the long ordeal was nearing its end. Each sunrise was a minor victory. Each day survived a testament to your family's endurance. So, as you imagine the heroic sagas of the Vikings, remember the silent, grinding struggle for survival that defined their winters. It was a time of brutal cold, profound darkness, desperate hunger, and pervasive boredom, testing the limits of human resilience. The chill of winter was not just a season, it was an adversary, often claiming lives and ensuring that the life of a Viking farmer was indeed a miserable one, where every spring felt like a miraculous rebirth. It makes you feel incredibly grateful for heated homes and year-round grocery stores, doesn't it? You've survived the brutal winter, a testament to sheer endurance. But even as the snows melted, the Viking farmer's life remained a perpetual battle against unpredictable forces' vulnerability to nature. Unpredictable fury. From sudden blizzards to devastating floods, a single act of nature's wrath could ruin a year's work, a family's livelihood, or even claim lives in an instant. Imagine the joyous relief of spring. The days are lengthening, the ice is breaking, and the first green shoots are appearing. You are diligently working in your fields, preparing for planting, a cautious hope blooming in your chest. Then suddenly, the sky darkens. A storm, unseasonal and violent, descends. It could be a late-season blizzard, dumping feet of snow and ice, burying newly emerged crops and killing vulnerable newborn livestock that had just been let out to pasture. One day of unseasonable weather could wipe out months of effort and shatter your hopes for a meager harvest. Or perhaps it's a period of prolonged, relentless rain. The thin, rocky soil quickly becomes waterlogged. Rivers swell, overflowing their banks and turning fertile valleys into raging torrents. Your precious fields, meticulously prepared for planting, could be submerged, the seeds washed away, the soil eroded. Your longhouse, built near a water source, could be threatened by rising floodwaters, forcing you to abandon your home and seek refuge on higher ground, leaving behind all your possessions. Imagine the despair of watching your entire year's livelihood literally float away, swept downriver by the muddy, churning water. The summers, though short and precious, held their own dangers. A sudden, unseasonal frost could descend in the crucial ripening period for your grain, turning the green stalks brittle and killing the developing kernels. Or a prolonged drought could bake the already poor soil, turning your fields to dust, leaving your crops stunted and withered. You'd spend agonizing days scanning the cloudless sky, desperate for rain, watching your plants slowly die, knowing that hunger would be your bitter companion come winter. Then there are the more dramatic, yet equally destructive acts of nature. Landslides were a constant threat in the mountainous terrain where many farms were nestled. Heavy rains or melting snow could destabilize slopes, sending tons of earth, rock, and trees tumbling down, burying entire farmsteads, lives, and livestock in an instant. You might hear the terrifying roar, a sound like thunder, and then the crushing silence, as a neighbor's farm simply vanished from the landscape. Fires, though often started by humans, were amplified by nature. During dry spells, a cooking fire, a stray spark from the hearth, or a lightning strike could quickly ignite your timber longhouse. Or worse, spread to your precious hay stores. A farm fire meant complete and utter ruin, loss of home, food, and shelter, leaving your family exposed to the elements and facing almost certain starvation in the coming winter. Imagine the desperate scramble to put out a blaze, knowing that everything you owned, Everything you had worked for was being consumed by flames. Even the sea, while offering opportunities for those who dared to sail, could wreak havoc on coastal farmsteads. Unusually high storm surges or powerful waves could devastate coastal settlements, washing away fishing boats, destroying small docks, and inundating fields with salt water, rendering them infertile for years. For communities reliant on both farming and fishing, such an event could be catastrophic. Archaeological evidence from coastal Viking Age settlements sometimes shows signs of rebuilding after significant flood events, hinting at these environmental challenges. The unpredictable fury of nature meant that a Viking farmer lived in a constant state of anxiety. Every season brought its own set of potential disasters. There were no crop insurance policies, no government disaster relief programs. Your survival depended solely on your own resilience, your capacity to rebuild, and the fragile hope that the next season would be more merciful. This constant vulnerability underscored the fragility of life in the Viking Age, where human efforts were often dwarfed and undone by the overwhelming power of the natural world. So, as you imagine the self-reliant Viking farmer, remember the persistent shadow of nature's cruelty. Their lives were a continuous battle against forces they could neither control nor predict, a testament to the immense challenges of wresting a livelihood from an untamed landscape. It truly makes you appreciate weather forecasts and disaster preparedness, doesn't it? You've explored the unforgiving lands, the gnawing hunger, the brutal toil, the cramped longhouses, the pervasive diseases, the external burdens, the shared gender roles, the chilling winters, and the unpredictable fury of nature. As we conclude our deep dive into the life of a Viking farmer, let's reflect on a life of grinding necessity, how their entire existence was a relentless struggle for survival. Far removed from the heroic sagas and romanticized images we often associate with the Vikings, imagine yourself, now an elder Viking farmer, sitting by the hearth, the smoke stinging your eyes, your body aching from a lifetime of relentless labor. You look at your calloused hands, your weathered face, and you know the truth of your existence. It was not a life of leisure, glory, or grand adventure for most. It was a life defined by unending struggle against a harsh environment and the constant threat of scarcity. The fundamental legacy of the Viking farmer is the testament to human endurance and resilience. To survive year after year in such challenging conditions, with rudimentary tools and little margin for error, speaks volumes about the tenacity of the human spirit. Every meager harvest, every successfully weathered winter, every healthy child who reached adulthood was a hard-won victory against overwhelming odds. These individuals were survivors, their very existence a defiance of nature's cruelty. This life of necessity also forged an incredibly strong sense of community and mutual dependence. While competition existed, the inherent vulnerability to famine, disease, and raids meant that cooperation was essential for survival. Neighbors helped each other with harvests, shared resources during lean times, and stood together in defense. The local assembly, was not just a legal forum but a vital communal gathering, fostering bonds necessary for collective survival. The sagas, while focusing on heroes, often hint at this underlying communal support. The Viking farmers' existence profoundly shaped their culture and worldview. Their close relationship with nature, their reliance on the unpredictable elements, fostered a deep reverence for the gods of thunder, sea, and fertility. Thor, Njord, Freyr. Their sagas and myths often reflected their daily struggles, celebrating courage, resilience, and the fatalistic acceptance of a harsh destiny. Life was a battle, not just against human foes, but against the very forces of the cosmos. Mirroring their daily fight against the land and weather, this constant struggle for sustenance also fueled, for some, the Viking expansion and raiding. While not every farmer became a raider, the promise of fertile lands, of plunder, and of escape from the grinding necessity of home often drove younger, ambitious, or desperate men to the longships. The miserable life on the farm, paradoxically, provided a powerful impetus for the very adventures that fill our history books, offering a stark contrast to the grueling reality left behind. Imagine hearing tales of easy riches from a returning raider, compared to your endless toil for a few handfuls of grain. It's a powerful motivator, isn't it? Finally, the legacy of the Viking farmer is one of uncelebrated foundation. They were the unglamorous bedrock upon which Viking society, its warriors, its chieftains, and its explorations were built. Their tireless labor produced the food, the raw materials, and the very stability that allowed others to pursue trade, warfare, and political power. They were the silent majority, living lives of quiet heroism defined by the sheer grind of necessity. Their stories rarely told in the grand sagas, yet their contribution was absolutely indispensable. So, as you conjure images of the magnificent Viking Age, look beyond the horned helmets, which, by the way, they didn't actually wear, and the fierce warriors. Remember the vast majority, the men and women who tilled the unforgiving soil, battled the bitter cold, and survived perpetual hunger. Their lives, a relentless struggle for survival against the unyielding forces of nature and necessity, truly illustrate the miserable life of a Viking farmer. It's a sobering reminder that survival itself was often the greatest saga of all. All right, as the last echoes of our journey through the miserable life of a Viking farmer fade into the quiet of the night, it's time to gently bring our minds back to the present. You felt the chill of the longhouse, cursed the rocky soil, and perhaps even experienced the gnawing pangs of imagined hunger. It's a powerful reminder that history, in its quietest corners, often reveals the most poignant truths about human resilience and the sheer will to survive. Let the images of harsh lands, dark winters, and persistent hunger fade away, giving way to the quiet peace around you. The smell of smoke and damp earth fades, giving way to the familiar comfort of your own space. Let any lingering thoughts of hard labor and the uncertainties of nature drift away, replaced by a sense of relaxation and peaceful reflection. The struggles and resilience of the Viking farmers of old are now, temporarily, part of your understanding, enriching your sense of history and the value of each meal, each warm moment. As your breathing deepens and your body relaxes, know that the stories of the past are always here, waiting patiently to be rediscovered whenever you seek a gentle escape into the depths of time. But for now, the journey is complete. Rest easy, knowing that another story has been revealed. Gently, just for you.